The desert stretched for endless miles, filled with red dust and broken stones, quiet except for the sound of dry wind. John, a human wanderer, walked slowly with his pack strapped on his shoulders. He was used to silence, but that day the silence felt heavier, as if something terrible had just happened. When he reached the small ridge, he froze. Below him was a black mark against the desert, twisted metal, cracked panels, and smoke still rising. It was a burned ship, an alien ship. Pieces scattered, like broken bones across the sand. The smell of fire and melted wires filled the air. John narrowed his eyes. He had seen wrecks before, mostly scavengers looting old crafts. But this one was different. It looked recent, maybe just hours old. He climbed down carefully, boots sinking into the hot dust. Every step closer, he felt something pull at him. Some instinct. The ship's hull was half buried in the sand, fire marks still glowing red. He touched one piece. It was hot. His hand snapped back. Suddenly he heard it. A soft sound, faint but real. It wasn't the wind, it was a cry. John's heart raced. He followed the sound, weaving through broken panels. The cry grew louder, weak, almost fading. Behind a cracked doorway, hidden in the shadows, he saw her, and Yao, alien woman. Her clothes burned and torn, cradling something in her arms. Her skin had strange silver patterns, her hair dark with ash. She held a small baby, wrapped in a dirty cloth, both of them trembling, her eyes bright green even through. The smoke lifted and locked on him. For a moment, time stopped. John raised his hands slowly, showing he carried no weapon. The woman hissed weakly, shielding her baby. Her lips moved, but the words were broken, foreign. She didn't trust him. "I won't hurt you," John said softly, his voice low, steady. She didn't understand the words, but maybe she felt the tone. Her breathing calmed a little, but her eyes never left him. The baby cried again, a thin, sharp cry that cut through the smoke. John glanced around. The sound could travel. In the wastelands, sound meant danger, scavengers, raiders, even wild beasts. His instincts told him to leave, but his heart refused. He stepped closer, slowly. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small water flask. He set it on the ground in front of her and pushed it gently toward her. The alien woman stared at it, then at him. Her lips were dry, cracked. Her arms shook as she held the child. Tighter. Finally, she reached for the flask. Her hands trembled as she lifted it, letting a few drops touch her mouth. Then she pressed it to the baby's lips. John let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Good," he whispered. His eyes scanned the desert ridge. He could feel eyes on him, maybe shadows moving. He knew scavengers would come soon. A crashed ship was like blood in water. It always drew predators. He crouched down, pointing to the woman, then to himself, then to the open desert, trying to show her they needed to move. She looked at him with fear, with doubt, but also with desperation. Her baby coughed weakly. She nodded once, almost too small to see. John leaned forward, carefully sliding his arms under her and the baby. She resisted for a moment, hissing like a cornered animal, but her strength gave out. She was too weak to fight, too weak to even stand. He lifted them both, surprised by how light she felt. The smoke around the wreck thickened. Sparks hissed from broken wires. In the distance, dust clouds moved. Riders on machines coming closer. John's jaw tightened. There was no more time. He ran, his boots slamming the sand, carrying the alien woman and her child against his chest. The wind whipped his face, but he didn't stop. The shadows on the horizon grew larger. Raiders. He could hear the faint growl of their engines. The baby cried again, but John held them tighter. "Quiet, little one, quiet," he muttered. His heart pounded. He reached a small rocky outcrop, where he had left his old transport bike hidden. With one motion, he set them down, started the bike, and pulled them both onto it. The woman clutched her child, eyes wide as the engine roared. John glanced back. Black dots on the horizon, raiders chasing the smoke. He pushed the throttle. The bike shot forward across the desert, leaving dust in its wake. The wind howled. The desert blurred. The baby pressed against the alien woman's chest. She looked at John again, this time not with hate, not with fear, but with something else. A spark of hope. John didn't know why he was doing this. He only knew one thing. If he left them, they would die. If he saved them, maybe everything in his life would change. And so, in the ashes of a burned ship, a decision was made. A human chose not to walk away, but to carry an alien widow and her baby toward a future neither of them could see. The desert behind them burned, with smoke and danger. But ahead, in the unknown distance, a new story had already begun. The bike roared across the wasteland, kicking up a trail of dust. John's hands gripped the handles tight while his eyes scanned the horizon. He could feel the alien woman trembling behind him, holding her baby close. Her weak breaths brushed against his back. The sun dropped lower, turning the sky into a deep red. Shadows stretched long across the ground. Night in the desert was deadly. Freezing winds, predators and raiders who used the darkness to hunt. He had to reach his outpost before the light was gone. His outpost was nothing special, just an old bunker half buried in stone, a place no one would care to find. The walls were cracked, and the roof leaked when storms came, but it had one thing that mattered: safety. He reached the metal door hidden between rocks, quickly pushed the bike inside, and locked the heavy hatch behind them. For a moment, only silence remained. Then, the baby's soft whimper filled the air again. The alien widow sank against the wall, her silver-marked skin pale under the dim light. She held the baby tightly, eyes darting around the small space. Her body shook with exhaustion and fear. John knelt and lit a small lamp, warm light spilling across the room. "I know it's not much," John said quietly, though he knew she couldn't understand him. "But it's safe." He pulled out his water flask again, offering it. She hesitated, then took it. Her lips trembled as she let the child drink first. Only after that did she take a sip herself. Her hands still shook, but she no longer pushed him away. John unpacked some dry ration, hard bread, a packet of preserved meat, and a small jar of dried fruit. He placed them on the ground, sliding them toward her. The woman sniffed the food suspiciously. Her stomach growled, the sound echoing in the bunker. She tore a small piece and put it in her mouth. Relief softened her face for the first time. The baby, however, didn't stop crying. The sound echoed through the stone walls. John tensed. Noise carried even here. "Shh," he whispered, his eyes sharp on the heavy hatch. "We don't want anyone hearing." He moved closer, carefully extending his arms. He gestured, "Let me hold the child." The woman's eyes flashed with fear. She pulled the baby away, but the child coughed, a dry sound that tore through the silence. Her hands trembled. She looked at John, then at the child. Finally, slowly, she allowed him to take the baby. The tiny creature fit awkwardly in his arms, smaller than any human infant, its skin faintly glowing with silver patterns like its mother's. The baby fussed, then quieted. As John rocked gently, he hummed a soft tune, an old song his mother once sang. The alien child blinked up at him, then finally stopped crying. The woman's eyes widened. She had not been able to calm the child. But this human, this stranger, had for the first time. She didn't look at him with only fear, but with a trace of wonder. John laid the child back in her arms. "There, see? Everything's fine," he whispered. But deep inside he knew it wasn't fine. He had seen the dust clouds earlier. Raiders had noticed the crash. They would search. They always searched. A wreck like that meant valuable scraps, and survivors were worth even more, to sell as slaves. He checked his old rifle leaning against the wall. He only had a few bullets left, not enough for a long fight. He ran a hand through his dusty hair, thinking fast. He couldn't keep them safe here forever, but for tonight at least, he could guard them. The alien widow watched him, her eyes sharp even in exhaustion. Slowly, she whispered something in her language, words he couldn't understand. Her tone was softer than before, not angry, not afraid, almost like gratitude. John nodded, even if he didn't know what she said. He sat down near the hatch, rifle resting across his knees. His ears stayed alert for the faintest sound outside. The night grew colder. Winds howled through cracks in the bunker. The woman wrapped her child tighter, teeth chattering. John pulled out an old blanket from his pack and laid it over them. She stiffened at first, then relaxed under the warmth. Hours passed slowly. Each creak of the bunker, each whistle of the wind made John's heart beat faster. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? Why was her ship in flames? Where was her people? He looked at the baby, then at her silver-marked skin. They were alone, vulnerable. If he hadn't found them, they would already be dead. Suddenly, a sound outside. Faint footsteps crunching. On sand, John's muscles tensed. He raised the rifle, eyes locked on the door. The woman stiffened too, clutching the baby. Her breathing quickened. John held a finger to his lips, signaling silence. The footsteps paused, right outside the bunker. Then a shadow passed over the small vent slit. Someone was there, listening. The baby whimpered, a small sound. John's chest tightened. He pressed a hand over the child gently, praying it wouldn't cry. The shadow lingered for long seconds, then slowly moved away, fading into the night. John didn't relax, not yet. He stayed awake the entire night, watching, waiting, guarding. The woman's eyes never left him. She seemed to realize he wasn't leaving them, not even for a moment. When the first light of dawn broke through the cracks, John exhaled deeply. He had kept them safe for one night, but he knew this was only the beginning. The raiders had found the wreck. They would come again searching, and when they came, hiding in the bunker would no longer be enough. The morning sun rose over the desert, but it brought no comfort. John stood outside the bunker, scanning the horizon with sharp eyes. The alien widow and her baby stayed inside, hidden. He knew. Raiders had passed close during the night. He could still see faint tracks in the sand leading toward the burned ship. The air was quiet. Too quiet. John's instincts told him danger was near. He crouched low, running his fingers across the ground. The tracks weren't just from scavengers. He saw boot marks, heavy ones, and the wheels of sandbikes. They were circling. They would be back. He went inside and bolted the hatch. The alien woman looked up quickly, clutching her baby close. Her eyes asked the question her mouth couldn't speak. John didn't need translation. "They're coming," he said in a low voice. She didn't understand the words, but she read the worry in his face. The baby began to fuss again, a soft cry that echoed in the small space. John winced. He shook his head and whispered, "Not now, little one." He tried to distract the child with a small piece of cloth from his pack. It worked for a moment, but the sound had already carried. That afternoon, faint noises drifted through the bunker walls. Voices, laughter, the growl of engines. John's grip tightened around his rifle. He motioned for silence, pressing a finger to his lips. The alien widow held her baby tighter, her breathing shallow. Through a crack in the stone wall, John saw them. Raiders, at least 5 of them, moving carefully, scanning the rocks. One of them bent down, pointing at the faint tracks near the hatch. John's blood ran cold. They had found the trail, he whispered quickly to the woman, using hand signals, pointing down. He lifted a stone slab in the corner, revealing a narrow crawl space beneath the floor. "Hide," he said, pointing to her and the baby. She hesitated, fear and doubt in her eyes, but his tone left no choice. She slid down into the space, holding her child close. John replaced the slab over them, covering the hiding spot. He pressed his back against the wall, rifle ready. His heart pounded so hard it echoed in his ears. The heavy boots crunched closer. Then came the first knock. Loud. "Against the hatch, open up!" a voice barked, rough and cruel. Silence answered. The raiders muttered among themselves. Then came another knock, harder. "We know you're in there." John gritted his teeth. His finger hovered over the trigger. If they forced their way in, he'd fight. But 5 against 1 with only a few bullets? It was suicide. The raiders argued outside. One of them kicked the hatch, metal rattling. "Lock's strong," one muttered. Another laughed. "We'll smoke him out." John's chest tightened. If they set fire to the bunker, the woman and child hidden below would suffocate. He had to think fast. He pulled a small metal pipe from his pack, leaned close to the vent and banged it loudly. The sound echoed far across the rocks. The raiders froze, looking around. "What was that?" one shouted. Another pointed toward the desert ridge. "Over there." They rushed toward the sound, leaving the hatch behind. John exhaled, sweat dripping from his forehead. He had bought time, but not safety. They would return, and next time they would search carefully. He lifted the stone slab. The alien woman stared up at him with wide, terrified eyes. She clutched her baby so tightly her knuckles had turned white. John helped her out, whispering, "It's okay for now." She didn't understand, but she felt the tension in his voice. The baby whimpered. John took her gently into his arms, rocking her. The child quieted once more. The mother stared in disbelief. How a stranger from another world could calm her child when even she failed. Hours passed with John pacing the bunker. He couldn't sleep, couldn't rest. His mind raced. He needed a plan. If he stayed here, the raiders would find them. If he tried to escape, the desert itself could kill them. That night, as the lamp flickered low, the woman surprised him. She crawled closer, whispering in her language. Then she touched a small pendant around her neck. She pressed a hidden switch, and the pendant projected faint blue symbols into the air. John blinked, surprised. It was some kind of alien tech. A map, maybe. The glowing lines showed routes, markers, a signal. She pointed at one spot glowing brighter than the rest. Her eyes pleaded. She wanted him to take them there. He studied it carefully. The path was dangerous, across raider territory, through harsh terrain. But the bright marker pulsed. Like a beacon. Maybe it was her people, maybe safety, maybe hope. John nodded slowly. "All right," he whispered. "We'll go." She didn't know the words, but she understood the nod. Relief softened her face for the first time. But outside, the shadows hadn't gone far. The raiders returned before dawn, whispering, searching. This time they didn't leave. This time they camped near the bunker, waiting. John knew then. Tomorrow would not be about hiding. It would be about surviving. The widow looked at him as if she already knew what was coming. Her baby stirred. Softly in her arms, John tightened his grip on the rifle. His jaw set. The desert had many shadows, but none as dangerous as the ones waiting outside their door. The night stretched long, but John didn't sleep. He sat by the hatch with his rifle, listening to the faint voices outside. The raiders had set up camp near the rocks, their fires glowing like hungry eyes in the dark. He could smell the smoke drifting inside. The alien widow sat in the corner, rocking her baby slowly. Her silver-marked face glowed faintly under the lamp. Her eyes never left John. She could sense his unease. She whispered something in her language, quiet like a prayer. When morning came, the voices outside grew louder. The raiders weren't leaving. John cursed under his breath. They had decided to wait, to starve him out. The first knock came again, louder than before. "Open the door, human," one of them barked. "We know you're in there. Give us the alien and the child, and we'll let you live." John didn't move. His heart pounded. The widow's eyes widened, her arms clutching her baby tighter. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone, the danger. The raiders laughed cruelly. "No answer. Maybe he wants to fight. He can't win. 5 of us, and maybe more. He's only one man." Another voice sneered. "We'll give him until sundown. If he doesn't open, we burn him out like rats." John's stomach tightened. He couldn't face them head on, not with so little ammo, but he also couldn't hand over the woman and her baby. He turned to her. She watched him carefully. She seemed to understand. His silence was not surrender, but defiance. The day crawled by. Every sound outside made John tense. Every baby's whimper felt like thunder. He knew the raiders were waiting for weakness, waiting for fear, but fear wasn't going to drive him out. Not today. Near dusk, something changed. The raiders knocked again, but this time softer. One of them called out, "Human!" We don't need to kill you, let's talk, open the hatch, let's make a deal. John narrowed his eyes. A deal? Raiders never made fair deals. Still, he had no choice but to listen. He cracked the vent slightly, his rifle ready. I'm listening, he called back. The raider laughed. Good, smart man, we don't want your life, just the alien. She's worth more than you can imagine. There's a buyer waiting for her, we'll even give you credits enough to live comfortably. John's grip on the rifle tightened, his jaw clenched. He glanced at the widow. She didn't know what was being said, but she stared at him with wary eyes, as if sensing betrayal. He shouted back, Not interested. His voice was sharp, final. The raider growled, Think carefully, human. You've got nothing here, no wealth, no future. Give her up and you'll have both. John's reply came like steel. She's not for sale. There was silence, then cruel laughter. Then you've chosen death, human. When the sun sets, we take her by force, and you along with her. The footsteps faded back to their camp. John lowered his rifle slowly. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. The widow studied him, her eyes shining. She didn't understand the words, but she had seen his anger. His refusal, he had chosen her side. Later that night, as the lamp flickered, she moved closer. For the first time, she tried to speak in broken human tongue. Her voice cracked. Why? You? No, me. Why? Help? John blinked, surprised. He hadn't realized she understood even a little. He answered softly, Because no one else will. His words were simple, but his tone carried weight. Her lips trembled. She lowered her head, whispering in her language. Then she touched the pendant around her neck again. The map flickered into view, glowing softly. She pointed at the beacon, her eyes desperate. There, safe. John studied it carefully. The raiders were between here and that point. The road ahead was suicide without a plan. But hope was better than waiting for death. He nodded slowly. We'll try. The widow gave the faintest smile. The first he had seen on her face, she pressed her baby against her chest, whispering to calm the child. Suddenly, a loud crash shook the hatch. The raiders had returned, testing the lock. John jumped to his feet, rifle ready. His heart pounded. The widow froze, clutching the child tightly. The metal door groaned. They're trying to break in, John hissed. He scanned the room, his eyes darting between the hatch and the crawl space. He couldn't just hide this time. They were determined. He set up a small trap near the entrance, using scraps from the burned ship he had salvaged earlier. A makeshift flash charge, not strong enough to kill, but enough to blind. The raiders slammed the hatch again, louder. Metal creaked. The widow whispered something fast, maybe a prayer. The baby began to cry. The sound pierced the silence. John cursed, sweat dripping down his forehead. He knew the raiders would not wait much longer. They would come with fire. They would come with weapons, and when they did, only his wits and his will to protect this strange new family would stand in their way. He tightened his grip on the rifle, jaw set, eyes hard. The raiders, outside, laughed again. Their leader's voice echoed. Last chance, human. Give us the alien or burn with her. John raised the rifle, his voice sharp, unshaken. Come and try. The desert night trembled with the sound of war waiting to begin. The desert night shook as fists and boots slammed against the bunkers. Hatch! Metal groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling. The raiders were done talking. They wanted blood. John crouched low, his rifle across his knees. His eyes were sharp, steady. The alien widow sat in the corner, her arms wrapped tight around her. Baby? The child whimpered, sensing the storm outside. The raiders shouted, Break it down, the human can't stop us. The sound of metal tools scraping against the lock made John's stomach twist. He had little ammo, but he had his mind. He had traps. He moved quickly, setting the small flash charge he had built near the door. He whispered to the widow, pointing at the crawl space. Hide. She shook her head, refusing to leave him. Her eyes blazed with defiance. The first blow struck. A crack appeared near the hinges. John crouched behind the wall, heart hammering. He counted the seconds. One more blow. 2. The hatch burst open with a screech. The raiders rushed inside, 5 shadows pouring into the bunker with blades and crude guns. But the moment their boots hit the ground, John triggered the trap. A blinding white light exploded. In the room, sparks flew. The raiders screamed, clutching their eyes, stumbling. John rose like a shadow, rifle firing sharp cracks. 2 raiders dropped instantly, the others blinded, staggering. The widow gasped, holding her baby tighter. The child began to cry, but John's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay low." The raiders regained their sight quickly, snarling like beasts. One swung a blade at John. He ducked, the blade slicing the air above his head. He rammed the rifle butt into the man's chest, knocking him back. Another lunged with a pistol. John fired, the shot echoing in the bunker, but the fight was far from over. Outside, more voices shouted, more footsteps. The second wave was coming. John grabbed the widow's arm, pulling her toward the crawl space. "We have to move," he hissed. She hesitated, but the sound of boots outside left no choice. She crawled through with the baby, John covering her. His rifle fired again, forcing the raiders to duck. They scrambled into a narrow tunnel beneath the bunker. The walls were damp with earth, darkness pressing in. The widow clutched her child close. John crawled behind, firing back through the small opening whenever shadows appeared. The tunnel led to a broken vent that opened into the desert outside. John pushed them through first, then dragged himself out. The night air hit his face, cold and sharp. Behind them, angry shouts filled the bunker. The raiders had found the tunnel. John grabbed his transport bike hidden under a rock ledge. He shoved the widow and child onto the back. "Hold tight," he barked. Then he kicked the engine alive. The bike roared, sand spraying as they sped into the darkness. The desert stretched endless under the stars. Engines roared behind them. The raiders were giving chase. Dust clouds rose like angry ghosts. Their headlights glared across the dunes. John pushed the bike harder, every bump jarring his bones. The widow clung to him with one hand, the other wrapped tight around her baby. Her eyes wide with terror, John's jaw was set. His mind raced. He couldn't outrun them forever. He steered toward a jagged canyon, hoping to lose them in the rocks. The bike skidded across the sand, engines behind them howling closer. Bullets whistled past, sparks flying from the stones. John pulled a small metal canister from his pack. One last trick from the wreckage. He yanked the pin and hurled it behind them. A blast of smoke erupted, swallowing the raiders in a choking cloud. Their engine sputtered, coughing. He didn't wait to see. He drove deeper into the canyon, winding through narrow paths. The walls towered above, blocking moonlight. The bike's engine echoed like thunder. Finally, he slowed near a hidden alcove, stopping the bike. He helped the widow down. Her legs shook, but she held the baby steady. John dragged rocks to cover the bike, hiding it from sight. Then he crouched low, listening. The sounds of raiders faded, distant echoes bouncing through the canyon. For now, they were safe. The widow sank against the rock wall, breathing hard. She whispered softly to her child, calming her. Then she looked at John. Her green eyes filled with something new. Not just fear, not just gratitude. Trust. John sat opposite her, wiping sweat from his brow. His rifle lay across his lap. He spoke quietly. "They won't stop. They'll keep hunting us until we reach that place." He pointed at the glowing map pendant she carried. She nodded slowly, her lips forming broken words. "We goes together." John stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Together," he said firmly. The night in the canyon was silent, broken only by the faint cries of the baby. But beneath that silence lay fire and steel, a promise that the fight had only just begun. The canyon lay quiet, but John knew silence was never safety. Raiders were like wolves. Once they caught a scent, they never let go. He sat against the rock wall, his rifle across his lap. His chest rose and fell in tired breaths. Beside him, the alien widow held her baby close, her green eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. The child had finally fallen asleep, its silver pattern shimmering softly. John whispered, "We can't stay here." His voice carried no strength, only truth. He stood slowly, but pain shot. Through his side, he gritted his teeth, placing a hand over his ribs. Blood stained his shirt, dark and wet. The widow gasped. She reached out quickly, pressing him back down. Her voice broke in halting human words. "You hurt?" John shook his head. "It's nothing." But his face twisted in pain. He had taken a blow during the fight, and now every breath was fire. The widow's eyes softened. She set the baby down carefully on a folded cloth, then turned to John. She tore part of her burned robe, pressing it firmly against his wound. He hissed, trying to push her hands away, but she didn't let go. "You save us," she whispered, her voice stronger now, though still broken. "Now, I save you." John's eyes met hers. For a moment, the harsh desert seemed far away. He nodded faintly, allowing her to work. She cleaned the wound with water from his flask, her touch gentle but firm. She wrapped the cloth tightly, whispering words he didn't understand, like old prayers. The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry. John reached out with a shaky hand. The child's tiny fingers curled around his thumb. The cry faded, replaced with a small coo. The widow froze, watching. Her lips parted, surprise clear in her eyes. The human, this stranger, had earned the baby's trust. She whispered in her own language, almost to herself. "He is not only warrior, he is protector." John smiled weakly. "Guess I'm family now." He didn't expect her to understand, but something in his tone made her chest tighten. The night grew colder. Winds howled through the canyon. John pulled out his old blanket, draping it over her and the child. She hesitated, then pulled part of it over him as well. For the first time, they shared warmth, but danger wasn't gone. Far in the distance, engines roared faintly. The raiders were still hunting. John clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stand. His wound ached, but his will was iron. "We move at dawn," he said firmly, pointing at the glowing marker on her pendant. "That's our only chance." The widow nodded. She touched his arm gently, a sign of agreement. Her eyes glistened with something deeper, not just survival, but trust, maybe even hope. When morning came, they set out. John limped but didn't stop. The widow walked beside him, carrying the baby close. The desert stretched endless, but the beacon on the pendant pulsed faintly, guiding them forward. By midday, the sun scorched their backs. John stumbled, nearly falling. The widow caught his arm, steadying him. "Together," she said in broken words. John gave a tired smile. "Together," he echoed. The baby fussed from thirst. John handed over the last of the water, watching the child drink. His throat was dry as sand, but he didn't complain. The widow noticed, her chest tightened. She tore a strip from her robe, soaked it with the last drops, and pressed it to his lips, forcing him to take some too. John's eyes softened. He whispered, "You didn't have to." She shook her head. "Family share." Her voice was still rough, but the meaning was clear. As night approached, the beacon grew brighter. They were close, but so were the raiders. Engines growled behind them, lights cutting through the desert dark. John's heart pounded. He raised his rifle, but his hands shook from blood loss. The widow stepped forward suddenly, pulling out a small device from the baby's wrappings. It was alien tech, hidden until now. She pressed a button and a shield of blue light flickered around them. Bullets from the raiders hit the barrier, sparking harmlessly. John's jaw dropped. "You had that all along?" She looked at him, her eyes steady. "Only once," she said, voice trembling. "Save for last." The barrier shuddered under fire, but it gave them enough time to run. John stumbled, nearly collapsing. The widow grabbed his arm, half dragging him. The baby clung to her chest, crying. The beacon ahead pulsed brighter, almost singing. Finally, they reached the ridge where the signal was strongest. A hidden door opened in the rock, light spilling. Out figures stepped forward, tall, armored, with the same silver patterns on their skin. The widow gasped, tears filling her eyes. She spoke quickly in her language. The figures rushed to her side, taking the baby into careful hands. John collapsed to his knees, exhaustion washing over him. His vision blurred. He felt hands lift him, voices calling out in strange words. He tried to focus on the widow's face. She looked at him with shining eyes, no longer afraid, no longer distant. "You fight for us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Now, We fight for you." John smiled faintly before darkness claimed him. For the first time since the burned ship, they were not running. They were not hiding. They were together, and the choice had been made. They were family, no matter the cost. When John opened his eyes, he didn't see sand or stone. He saw smooth silver walls glowing softly with light. His body rested on a strange bed, warm energy flowing through it. His side, once torn with pain, was wrapped in glowing bands that pulsed gently. He tried to move, but a calm voice spoke in, alien tongue telling him to rest. He turned his head and there she was. The alien widow sitting nearby with her baby, her green eyes filled with relief when she saw him awake. She leaned forward, whispering softly, "You, live." John's lips curved into a faint smile. "Guess I do." His voice was weak but steady. He glanced at the baby, who reached tiny silver-marked hands toward him. He lifted his fingers, and the child grasped them tightly. The widow's eyes softened, a single tear falling. Moments later, armored figures entered the room. Her people, tall and graceful, their faces serious yet respectful. They bowed slightly toward the widow, speaking words John couldn't understand. She answered quickly, pointing at him. Her tone was strong, protective. One of the aliens turned to John, speaking in rough human tongue. "You saved her. You saved, child, for this. We owe you." John blinked, surprised. "I only did what was right," he murmured. The alien's sharp eyes studied him, then gave a slow nod. "Few would risk life for strangers. You are different." The widow leaned closer, struggling with the words. "Not stranger, not now." Her voice trembled, but her meaning was clear. John's chest tightened, warmth filling him. Days passed as John healed. The alien refuge was hidden. Deep within the cliffs, protected by old technology, safe from raiders, he watched their way of life. The glowing farms carved into rock, the silent guardians who stood watch, the children who played with silver-marked skin shining like stars. Yet wherever he went, eyes followed him. Some were curious, others suspicious. A human among them was unheard of. The widow stayed close, always at his side, her baby often in John's arms. The child would laugh when he spoke, as if his voice brought comfort. The others noticed, whispers spreading. One evening, the leader of the refuge summoned John, a tall elder with silver hair that shimmered like moonlight. His voice was calm but heavy with power. "You are human. You should not be here, yet you are, and you bled for one of our own. Tell me, why?" John's gaze didn't waver. "Because no one deserves to die alone in the ashes of a ship. Not her, not the child." His words were simple, but they carried weight. The elder studied him for a long moment, then finally said, "Perhaps your kind is not as cold as we believed." The widow stepped forward, clutching her child. She spoke firmly in her own tongue, pointing at John. Her voice rose with emotion. Her people listened in silence. Some nodded slowly, others looked uncertain, but none could deny her words, or the truth that this human had saved her. That night, John sat by the fire in the cavern. The widow approached, her baby asleep against her shoulder. She lowered herself beside him. For a long time, they didn't speak. The crackle of the fire filled the silence. Finally, she whispered in broken words, "You, not just savior, you are family." John's breath caught. He turned to look at her. Her eyes shone with sincerity. Her hand trembled as she touched his. "You fight, you bleed, you stay. Family." His throat tightened. He squeezed her hand gently. "Family," he echoed. From then on, he was no longer treated as an outsider. He worked beside them, helping repair broken machines with his human skill. He hunted with their warriors. He carried water for their children, and every night he returned to the widow and her baby, who now laughed whenever he entered the room. The raiders never stopped searching, but the refuge was hidden too well, and if they came too close, the alien stood ready. And now, so did John, rifle in hand, heart steady. He no longer fought for survival alone. He fought for his family, weeks. Later, as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky with gold and red, John stood at the ridge above the refuge. The widow came beside him, her child in her arms. She looked at the horizon, then at him. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Before, I had nothing. Now, I have you." John's chest swelled with emotion. He rested his hand gently on the baby's head. "And now," he said softly, "I have you too." The wind blew across the cliffs, carrying away the shadows of fear, for in the ashes of a burned ship, something greater had been born, not just survival, not just trust, but a home, a family, a bond that no desert, no raiders, no darkness could ever break. And so the human who once walked the wastelands alone was no longer alone. He had found a new life among stars not his own, and in the heart of an alien widow and her child, he had found his place, a new home not made of stone or steel but of love, loyalty, and the promise of tomorrow.